old men like you are just dead weight.
You mistake silence for weakness. That will be your first and last error in my house.
Brian!
Stop!
Dearest, add a verbal password, 2-step every transfer, and remove all view access. Effective now.
Confirm, sir.
Alert set.
We list fast, net 600, and your monthly check covers assisted living. You won't have to worry.
Partner, this is Thomas Reed, co-founder of our company.
I was not aware.
All good. For clarity, my home is held in a private trust. Any decisions about it come from me as trustee.
I was wrong. I disrespected you and what you built.
This isn't about my money. It's about your character.
I sat in my own living room when my daughter's fiancé leaned back and said, "Old men like you are just dead weight." His words sliced deeper than any knife. He thought my $600,000 house was already his, that I was powerless. But deep down, I knew better. One move, one $45,000 check, and his arrogance would crumble in front of everyone. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room that afternoon, the late light spilling across the hardwood floor I had laid with my own hands decades ago. The house, now worth close to $600,000, had once been nothing more than a modest frame and a dream that my wife and I built together. Every nail, every coat of paint, every dollar saved had gone into making this place a home. I thought of the sacrifices I had made for my daughter over the years, how I paid more than $60,000 in tuition so she could go to college without debt, how I bought her a $25,000 car when she graduated because I wanted her to have a safe way to drive to work. I thought about those long nights when I stayed up late doing extra shifts, when every penny I saved went not into my own comfort, but into giving her the best life possible. And yet, now, here I sat, hearing that her fiancé had laughed at me, had called me a broke old man, had sneered at the very walls that sheltered her childhood. The sting of betrayal burned in my chest. The house itself seemed to whisper memories. I could almost hear my wife's laughter in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes when she cooked Sunday dinner, the echo of my daughter's footsteps running down the hallway on Christmas morning. On the mantel sat the photo of our wedding, my wife in her white dress, smiling like the whole world was hers. That photo had been a compass for me through every storm. To hear my son-in-law dismiss this house as a failure cut deeper than any insult. This place wasn't just lumber and bricks. It was where birthdays had been celebrated, where tears had been wiped away, where every scar and scratch on the floor told a story. And now, to Brian, it was just property, a $600,000 asset he thought he could control. The thought twisted inside me like a knife. He didn't see the warmth. He didn't see the history. He only saw dollar signs and an old man standing in his way. For a long time, I sat with the silence pressing against me. At first, I felt only pain, that raw shock when you realize the people you trusted most see you as nothing more than an obstacle. My own daughter's silence when he mocked me had spoken louder than words. It wasn't just an insult anymore. It was an intention, a plan. I began to see clearly this wasn't about respect. It was about control. They wanted the house, the savings, the security I had built, and if that meant pushing me aside, treating me like dead weight, they were willing to do it. My grief slowly hardened into resolve. The shift was subtle, like a tide turning. I went from thinking, how could they? Thinking, what will I do now? The pain did not disappear, but it became fuel. I would not be cast aside. I would not let them erase my dignity or my labor. I thought of my wife, gone these many years, her voice still strong in my mind. She used to tell me, "Don't ever let anyone look down on the life we built. It's worth more than gold." I whispered to her then, as if she were sitting beside me. "Mary, they think I'm weak. They think I'll hand it all over. But you and we didn't come this far to let our story end like this." Shout! My eyes stung as I said it, because I missed her counsel, her steady hand on my shoulder. Yet, even in her absence, she guided me. Her words became an anchor. I could almost feel her presence in that quiet room, reminding me that what we built was sacred, that no arrogant young man would strip it away without a fight. My gaze drifted to the old wooden desk in the corner, the one where I used to sit late at night, writing out business plans with Richard, my partner at Technova. I opened the bottom drawer, fingers brushing against a familiar folder. Inside were documents many had long forgotten, the incorporation papers from when we started the company, letters of agreement, and proof of my shares. Alongside it lay my life insurance policy, carefully paid into for decades. Holding those papers, the weight of the pages felt heavier than iron. They weren't just documents. They were weapons, proof of who I was, of what I still had, of what no one could take from me. My chest rose with something I hadn't felt in days. Power. For all the insults and humiliation, I still held the keys. I sat there, the folder open on my lap, the sunset painting the room in shades of amber and crimson. The light caught the edge of the photo of my wife, and for a moment I felt she was smiling at me again. I whispered softly, "All right, Mary. They think they know the man I am. But soon, Nancy will see who her father really is, and Brian will regret every word." I closed the folder, pressed it against my chest, and knew this was only the beginning. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened something inside me that had slept too long. The next chapter of this fight was about to begin. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment one below to let me know you're here with me. I woke up before the sun and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, a black pen, and a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. In that silence, I could hear my wife's voice, the way I always do when I have a decision to make. Don't let anyone rewrite the story we built. I looked at the clock, took a breath, and called my attorney. "David," I said when he answered on the second ring, "it's time to review everything. The house, the savings, my shares in Technova. I want it airtight." He did not waste words. He never does. "Come in at 10, he said. "Bring your papers." I gathered the folder from the desk in the den, the one with the worn corners and the heavy snap. It held the incorporation papers we filed back when Technova was nothing but a garage and a promise, the stock ledger, my life insurance policy, and a copy of the will my wife and I signed the year before she passed. I slid the folder into a canvas bag and stood at the front door a moment, hand on the knob, listening to the old house breathe. The air smelled like cedar polish and yesterday's coffee. Sunlight broke across the hallway in a perfect rectangle. I whispered to her the way I always do. "Mary, they think I'm done. They think I'll roll over, but I am still here." David's office sits on the second floor of a brick building downtown, above a pharmacy that smells like soap and a life well organized. His conference room has a long oak table, the grain running like a river down its center. I laid the folder out on the wood. He opened it with careful hands. For an hour, we went line by line. The deed to the house, the will, the policy, the share certificates. He made notes in the margin, short and neat. When we finished, he folded his hands. "You are exposed in 2 places," he said. "First, the house is titled in your name. If someone pressures you, they can push a sale. Second, your savings at First National could be drained if anyone gets control of you or access to your accounts. We will fix both." "How?" I asked, though I already knew pieces of the answer. "A revocable living trust for the house," he said. "Reed Home Trust, you as trustee. We record the deed with the county. No sale without your signature as trustee. You can revoke it, but no one else can touch it. For the savings, we add a verbal passcode and 2-step callback, remove any view access you may have given, and put a fraud alert on your profile. We change beneficiaries if you want to, but that can wait. We also drafted a durable power of attorney with strict limits. Only someone you choose. No one else can move a dollar." I let that settle in. The relief did not come like a wave. It came like a slow thaw. "Do it," I said. "Do all of it." He nodded and slid a stack of papers across the table. "Initial here, sign here, date here." The pen felt heavy in my hand, but steady. Every signature felt like I was hammering a nail back into place. When I walked out onto the sidewalk, a breeze came off the lake, cool and clean. I stood there with the folder under my arm, watching a city bus hiss to a stop and then roll on. My phone buzzed, a text from Brian. He wanted to meet for lunch at Lakeview Grill. "We should talk about the house," he wrote. "It is time to be realistic." I could almost hear the smug tone in those typed words. I typed back, "Sure, noon." Then I called the bank. First National keeps its main branch on the corner where the bus lines cross. Inside, it smells like carpet and coins. The branch manager knows me by name. "Mr. Reed," she said, cheerful and professional, "how can we help you today?" We sat in her glass-walled office. "I need a verbal password added to every account," I said, "and two-step verification for all transfers. No wires without a callback to me. If anyone calls for information, you call me. No exceptions." She typed fast. "Done," she said after a moment. "Do you also want to remove the online view access we granted to your daughter during the pandemic?" I let the question hang in the air. It tasted bitter. "Remove it," I said, "effective immediately." She nodded, typed again. "It is done. And for your savings account, the one with $212,000 and change, we can place an alert. Any withdrawal over $5,000, we call you." I looked at her. "Place the alert." She printed confirmations. I slipped them into the folder and felt a weight shift inside my chest. On my way out, I stopped at the teller window. "I need a certified check for $45,000, I said. The teller looked up, surprised at the size, then smiled. "For a special occasion?" I nodded once. "For a wedding gift," I said. "Please make it payable to my daughter and her fiancé." The printer hummed. The paper was thick and official. I held it a second longer than necessary, then slid it into an envelope and tucked it into the folder with everything else. At noon, I sat in a booth at Lakeview Grill, my back to the window, my face to the door. The place had that old Chicago feel to it. Brass rail, framed black and white photos, the scent of grilled fish and lemon butter. Brian walked in 5 minutes late, eyes on his phone, tie knotted a little too tight for the collar he chose. He sat, waved for the waiter, and ordered without looking at me. He launched into his talk before the water hit the table. He talked about the market, about interest rates, about optimizing legacy assets. He used phrases like, "It tasted good to say them." "We can list your place quickly," he said. "Houses like yours are getting over asking. Emily and I have looked at assisted living for you. A nice place, not too far. It will be better for everyone." I kept my face still. I let him run out of breath. I nodded as if he were describing the weather. When he paused, I said, "It is a lot to think about." I said it softly, like a man grateful for a young expert's guidance. I even lowered my eyes. He mistook that for surrender. He leaned back, pleased with himself. "We can set an appointment this week. I know a realtor who will do a free staging consult. You will not have to lift a finger." I stirred my coffee and let the spoon ring against the cup. "Let me show you something after lunch," I said. "If you have time?" He smiled like a coach with a playbook. "Sure," he said. "Let me help move this process along." He said the process like he was proud of the word. We drove back to my house. He walked in like he owned the air. He ran a finger across the hall table like a man inspecting a motel. "You keep it clean," he said, and then added, "for your age." He moved into the living room, took in the pictures, the books, the scuffed baseboard where a tricycle once lived. He walked to the den and put both hands on the back of the chair where I had read for years. He looked around and laughed under his breath. "You know, this would show better if we took down the old photos. Buyers want to imagine their life, not yours." I watched him. I kept the anger behind my teeth. "Old photos?" I asked. He pointed at my wedding picture. That," he said, pointing at a framed article from an industry magazine. "No one wants a museum." He moved to the window and looked out at the backyard, the lilac I planted for my wife, the small garden that keeps me sane. He shook his head. The yard is fine, but the house, it is an old man's place, a bit of a dump, a starter home that never grew up. He said the last part like a joke. He waited to see if I would laugh with him. I felt the heat climb my neck. I set my hands on the back of the couch so I would not do something I would regret. That room, those walls, this roof, had sheltered more love than he had seen in his life. He called it a dump, an old man's place. That was the moment the new fire took full shape inside me. I smiled instead. Small, controlled. "You may be right," I said. "Maybe it is time." His shoulders dropped, a little sigh of victory. He took out his phone and dialed someone named Monica. He spoke in that half-whisper people use when they want to sound important in another person's house. "We can list a 600,000 in Evanston," he said, and then he began to describe my living room like a man reading a grocery list. While he talked, I walked to the mantel. I straightened the photo of my wife by a fraction of an inch. "They think I have lost," I told her in my head, "but the game has just begun." After he left, full of himself and his plan, I called David from the kitchen. "Move fast," I said. "Record the deed today if you can. I want the trust official by nightfall." He said, "Understood." I could hear the scratch of his pen through the phone. "Also," I said, "draft a notice revoking any power anyone thinks they have over my medical or financial decisions. Something we can pull out if needed." "Done," he said. "Come by at 3. We will sign. Bring your driver's license." In the hours between noon and 3, I called First National again from the porch, where Mary and I used to drink iced tea in July. I asked the manager to confirm the changes. She read them back to me, her voice clear and sure. New password, 2-step verification, withdrawal alerts, view access removed, fraud alert in place. She asked if I wanted to add a secondary call number in case my cell failed. "Add the landline," I said. She did. "Do you want to add a note to your profile?" she asked. "What kind of note?" "That you will never authorize a real estate wire from that savings account. It stops con artists. They try to bully seniors into pressure sales." I watched a sparrow land on the fence and puff its chest like a tiny soldier. "Add the note," I said. "No real estate wires, not from me." I went to the bedroom and opened the old cedar chest. The smell brought Mary so close that I had to sit on the bed for a minute. Her sweater lay on top, the blue one she wore to our daughter's high school graduation. I set it in my lap. The cufflinks sat in a small velvet box at the bottom. Platinum. Technova's logo in miniature. Richard had them made for our 20th year in business. I opened the box. The metal caught the light like a quiet wink. They would stay in the drawer for now, silent, patient, waiting for the right room, the right eyes, the right moment. Brian did not know the story those cufflinks could tell by themselves. At 3 o'clock, I was in David's office again, signing where he told me to sign. The deed into Reed Home Trust. The trust itself, naming me as trustee and Richard as successor trustee, only if I died or lost capacity, as proven by 2 doctors. The new will, simple and hard as a hammer. The limited power of attorney is locked down to routine tasks with explicit bans on gifts, transfers, and real estate. A healthcare directive that named my physician and described what I want, in my words, so no one could claim to speak for me if things went wrong. David slid each signed page into a manila envelope and marked it with a black pen. When we finished, he stood, shook my hand, and said, "I will walk the deed to the recorder's office right now. You will have certified copies before dinner." On my way out, he stopped me at the door. "You look different from what you did this morning," he said. "You look like a man who got his hands back on the wheel." I looked at the clock on his wall, old and heavy, the kind that ticks with a sound you can feel. "Maybe I finally remembered where I put the keys," I said. He smiled the way a man smiles when he sees a plan take form. Back home, Nancy's car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the front steps, hands tucked under her knees, the way she did when she was 10. For a moment, I saw two versions of her layered over each other. My little girl, who needed me to fix scraped knees. The grown woman who had let a man insult me in my own house. She looked up at me with eyes full of apology and excuses. "Dad," she said, standing, "Brian wants what is best for everyone. He thinks the house is too much for you. I told him we should wait, but he says the market is hot, and if we miss it—" I held up a hand gently. "No storms on the steps," I said. "Come inside." We sat in the living room. The light was soft and kind. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve the way her mother used to. I told her I had thought about things. I told her I was considering all options. I used calm words, measured words, the words a tired father uses when he wants to be left in peace. She relaxed. I could almost see the tension leave her shoulders. She took my hand. "We want you safe," she said. "We want you comfortable." I nodded. "I know," I said. I did not tell her what I had signed that afternoon. I did not tell her the house now sat in a trust with my name on the lock. I did not tell her about the note at the bank. I let her believe she had time to push. "Let Brian call the realtor," I said quietly. "Let him make his lists." Her face brightened. "He will be happy to hear that," she said. "He is trying so hard." I stared at the fringe on the rug so she would not see what passed through my eyes. When she left, the house felt bigger than it had that morning. Not empty, ready. I cleaned the kitchen to give my hands something to do. I washed the coffee cup I had not used. I dried it with the towel that has a crooked hem, the one Mary and Nancy sewed together on a winter afternoon while it snowed heavily and wet. I put the cup back in the cabinet and stood still. "They think I have lost," I said out loud this time, "but the game has just begun." The next day, Brian came by to help. He carried a tape measure and a notebook. He walked through the rooms and spoke as if he were narrating a house tour for strangers. "We can open this wall," he said, tapping a load-bearing beam with his knuckle. "We can repaint everything white. We can bring in rental furniture so it looks less lived in." He said he lived in like it was a sin. He thumbed through my bookshelf and held up a framed photo of me and Richard in the early days. We were young and tired and grinning into the flash. "You still keep this?" he said, amused. "You worked at Technova? Office guy?" I looked at the photo a moment longer. "I did a little bit of everything," I said. He didn't hear me. He was already measuring the mantel and talking to himself about scale. When he finished, he sat at my kitchen table and made columns on his pad. He wrote numbers that meant more to him than to me. He added a line that said commission and one that said staging fee. He circled both. He pushed the pad toward me like a waiter with a bill. "If we move fast, we can net you over $600, he said. "You can put that into an annuity. Your monthly check will cover assisted living. You will not have to worry." He sat back and laced his hands behind his head. Self-satisfaction looked small on him, like a borrowed coat. I nodded slowly. "That is a lot of money," I said. "You have done your homework." He grinned. "I'm good at this," he said. "I do it every day." He lifted his glass and took a sip of water like it was champagne. "Monica is free tomorrow at 9 to walk through. She will send a listing agreement tonight. Just sign it. We will take care of the rest." He stood, tapping the tabletop with his knuckles as if sealing a deal. "I am glad you're listening to reason," he said. He left whistling something thin and cheerful. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt like a promise. An hour later, the email dinged on my phone. The listing agreement, bright and slick and full of boxes to initial. I forwarded it to David with one line. "For your collection," he replied within minutes. "Filed and noted," he wrote. Then a second email. A scan of a stamped document. The county recorder's seal is at the bottom. The deed to Reed Home Trust was officially recorded at 4:13 p.m. The weight that left my shoulders then was almost physical. I printed the deed and held the warm paper in both hands. It felt like the house itself had stepped behind me, put a hand on my back, and said, "I am with you." That evening, I drove to a men's shop on Michigan Avenue. Not the kind that shouts brand names. The kind where the tailor looks at your shoulders and knows what year you carried your heaviest burdens. I chose a charcoal suit with a quiet stripe. The salesman chalked the cuffs and nodded once, like he approved of whatever I was not saying out loud. On the glass counter by the register, they kept small boxes for cufflinks. I did not need any. I already had the ones that mattered, Technova, Platinum, a private language made of metal and light. I pictured them against a starched white cuff. I pictured Richard's eyes when he saw them. I pictured Brian's face when the room shifted and the truth stood up and said hello. Back home, I laid the suit across the bed and set the velvet box on the nightstand. I placed the folder on the desk, the new deed on top, the bank confirmations beneath it, the certified wedding check tucked into its envelope like a card. I opened the window. Night air came in soft and cool. Somewhere, a train called out in the distance. I sat in the chair by the window and let the day drain out of me. I thought about how quickly the ground can tip under your feet and how quickly you can steady it again if you remember who you are. I thought about my daughter's face on the steps and the way she squeezed my hand. I thought about the boy in my kitchen, drawing columns and commissions and futures that did not belong to him. Before I turned out the light, I spoke into the room, softly so the words would not scare the peace away. They think I am weak, I said. They think I am alone. They think this house is just boards and paint, but they do not know what is stitched into these walls. I touched the cufflink box with my fingertips. They do not know what I carry, I said, and then I smiled, a small, cold smile that surprised even me. They will. In the morning, David called to confirm that the county had posted the recording. The trust was now a matter of public record. He had couriered certified copies to my house. He asked if I wanted him to send a polite letter to the realtor explaining that no listing could be executed by anyone but me as trustee. Hold it for now, I said. Let them bring their papers. We will answer when it counts. He understood the theater of family as well as the law. Very well, he said. One more thing, he added. Richard called. He said to tell you the cufflinks are still the best gift he has ever given. He hopes you will wear them soon. I looked at the small box on the desk and felt the room warm by a degree. Tell him I will, I said. By noon, Monica, the realtor, called to confirm her 9 o'clock walk-through. Her voice sounded like polished glass. I am excited to help your family, she said. Brian tells me you are ready. I could hear papers shuffle on her end. I could hear the smile people use when they think they have a signature coming. Bring your best, I said. We like to see a professional at work. When we hung up, I laughed out loud, quick and quiet. Not cruel, something cleaner than that. The sound a man makes when a trap door he built with his own hands settles into place with the right kind of click. Late afternoon, I drove back to the bank to place the deed copy and the cufflinks in the safe deposit box, just for a night, just to feel the old ritual of steel and key and signature line. The vault smelled like paper and time. The box slid out with a smooth metallic sigh. I laid the deed inside, then the cufflink box, then the bank confirmations. I held the certified wedding check a second longer and then pressed it flat beside the paperwork. A neat row. A quiet army. I locked the box and felt the small vibration run through the metal. On my way out, the manager waved. Everything set? She asked. Everything, I said. Back home, I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at the place the way a stranger might. The scratch on the floor from the tricycle was still there. The dent in the baseboard where a Christmas tree stand slipped once upon a time. The light fell over the couch like a blessing. In that light, I could almost see Mary on the far end, feet tucked under her, book in her lap. We are almost there, I said to the empty room. Almost. That night, an email arrived from David. It contained one page only, a formal notice on letterhead. To whom it may concern, it began, and then, in plain words, it said what needed saying. The house at my address is held in trust. No listing, no sale, no transfer. No one but me may act. It was the gentlest kind of barricade. It was also made of stone. I printed it and laid it on top of the folder. I placed a pen beside it. I slept well for the first time in days. I woke before the alarm, dressed in a clean shirt, and opened the cufflink box just to see the way the metal catches the morning. Then I closed it again and laughed at myself, a quiet laugh in an old house that knows all my private jokes. I slid the notice from David into a plain envelope and tucked it into the folder. I took one last look around the room and turned for the door. As my hand touched the knob, I paused and said it one more time, because saying it made the ground firm under my feet. "They think I lost," I whispered, "but the game has just begun." I stepped into the hall and carried the folder to the car. The next part would not happen here. It would happen under chandeliers and cameras and 100 watching eyes. Before I pulled the door shut, I laid my palm against the wood. Warm, solid. Mine. I locked it and walked to the driveway with a smile I could not quite hide. Brian thought he had a schedule. He thought he had a plan. He did not know I had already signed the only papers that mattered. He did not know the only signature that counted was already dry. He did not know what those small platinum cufflinks could say without a word. He did not know, not yet, that I was ready. He would. Soon. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The Drake's lobby shone like a polished memory, brass railings catching the afternoon sun, marble floors mirroring shoes and shadows. I stood with my hands folded behind my back, the charcoal suit sitting right, the shirt crisp, the old Technova cufflinks tucked beneath the jacket sleeve where only a careful eye would see them. The quartet in the corner warmed up, a violin testing a bright note that hung in the air like a promise. Guests drifted through like schools of fish, sequins and satin, and conversations about the market, the menu, the right neighborhood to buy in next. I could smell lilies and lemon oil from the banister. I could feel the pulse in my throat because my daughter was getting married, and because Justice had chosen today to show up early. Before the ceremony, before the doors opened, and the aisle stretched like a quiet river, Brian found me near the coat check. He had a garment bag slung over one arm, a folded receipt pinched between 2 fingers. He smiled the way a salesman smiles at a closing, not a father. "I picked this up for you," he said, dropping the bag into my hands. "A rental, clean, acceptable. People at Richard's level notice everything. You don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons." He slipped the receipt into my pocket like a favor. "No need to thank me. For someone like you, simple works best." The words landed heavy, but not where he intended. For a second, I saw my wife standing behind him, chin tilted. "Whatever you do, don't flinch." I eased the garment bag back into his arms. "I've got my own suit," I said, a small smile, steady and polite. "Fits me fine." His eyes skated down my jacket, his mouth twisting. "If you insist," he said, like he was resigning himself to a child's stubbornness. "Just don't make this harder than it has to be." He turned away without waiting for my answer, already scanning the room for Richard, already rehearsing the conversation where he would link his future to the man who signed the biggest checks. I touched the cuff of my sleeve, felt the cool metal under the cloth, and let the humiliation simmer down into something useful. I had learned to use small insults the way a flint uses steel. It only takes a thin strike to light an honest fire. The chapel glowed. I met my daughter at the door, her arm light in mine, her veil soft as breath across my knuckles as I lifted it. She looked like her mother in the first spring dress of the year. Bright, hopeful, a little terrified of how good things can be when they are good. "I'm ready, Dad," she whispered. I nodded because words would have spilled and drowned us both. We took the first step, then the next, down the aisle that had carried so many before us to their future. I felt the weight of eyes, the hush that only a ceremony can command. I saw Richard in the front pew, profile stern and kind, hands folded. He looked like what he's always been to me, the other half of a promise we kept. I felt the cufflinks at my wrist and thought, soon, not yet, soon, the vows were said. The kiss was met with applause that sounded like rain on a summer roof. Relatives dabbed at their eyes. Friends grinned. Brian's colleagues in their dark suits nodded, satisfied that their rising star had just attached himself to a family he could manage. It was strange how relief and dread could stand next to each other and pretend to be cousins. Relief at the beauty of it all. Dread at what he would try to do next. We walked out into the light, a bell chiming somewhere above us, and then we were swept into the reception hall where glass caught the chandelier and broke it into 1,000 small suns. Brian became a tour guide. He pulled Nancy from person to person, shaking hands, telling polished stories with the rhythm of a man who measures relationships like assets. He praised himself with modest words. He called attention to his team with practiced generosity. Every few minutes, his eyes cut toward Richard, calculating. He saw me once by the bar, lifted his chin as if to remind me where I stood in his map of the evening, and then stayed where he was. He wanted the right people to see him. He wanted the right people to hear him. He thought my job was to stay out of the frame. Monica arrived in a navy dress that said she understood expensive rooms. Brian welcomed her with a quick squeeze to the elbow, the way people greet a partner who can move product without making a mess. He leaned into her ear, smiling. I watched her eyes flick past him, across the room, taking in square footage as if assessing a lot. She carried a leather portfolio, the kind designed to close softly over signatures. Richard stood near the windows where Lake Michigan glowed like a sheet of hammered metal. I moved toward him, slow enough to let the moment find its breath. He didn't see me at first. He was looking out at the water, as if reading the lake for the forecast of a man's life. I stopped a few feet away. He turned, polite, ready to play his role in the parade of congratulations. His gaze dropped, just a fraction, to the cuff at my wrist. He froze. The smile slipped, then returned wider, real this time. Thomas, he said, the name carrying 30 years and 1,000 cups of midnight coffee. What in the world? He stepped in, hand out, grip firm. For a flicker of a second, he looked troubled. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, low enough only I could hear. I wanted to see who he was when he thought no one important was watching, I said. Richard nodded, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening with something like pride. Brian spotted us and came fast, relief at the sight of his boss speaking to family written in big letters across his face. Mr. Cole, he said, sliding between us just enough to put himself at the center. This is Nancy's father. He's retired, lives modestly in Evanston. He smiled toward me like a nurse explaining to a patient. We're helping him manage a few things. Downsizing, you know. It's the right choice. Richard did not look at Brian. He kept his eyes on me. Then he moved his gaze down again, to the cuff, to the tiny platinum marks shaped like a story only two men fully knew. He laughed, short and disbelieving, then clapped my shoulder. Partner, he said, loud enough for the circle of colleagues to hear. Now that's a surprise worth the ticket. Conversations around us stalled. Brian blinked, smile pausing, then tried to restart, but failed. Partner? He repeated. I'm not sure Thomas Reed, Richard said, and he let the full weight of the name rest on the table like a stack of ledgers. Co-founder of Technova, the man whose patents built your quota, the man whose designs kept our lights on when the economy would have preferred us dead. He turned to me. And a stubborn son of a gun for not giving me a heads up. The color left Brian's face like a tide pulled by a cruel moon. He swallowed, throat working, then tried to sew his mask back together with thread made of denial. I didn't know, he said quickly, the words tripping over each other. No one told me. Never said. He acted like He stopped because the rest of that sentence would have finished him faster. He turned to me with a smile that looked more like a bruise. Sir, if I had known... That's the line, I said quietly. If you had known. I let it sit there. He fidgeted with his tie. I was only trying to help, he said, voice pitching higher. I was looking out for the family, for the house, for everyone. You have to admit, it's a lot for someone your age. He tried a laugh. It wandered around and died near the ice bucket. Richard's eyes had gone cool. You introduced my partner as an unemployed burden, he said, each syllable crisp enough to count. In public, at his own daughter's wedding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You will meet with HR on Monday morning. We will discuss what working here requires. Monica, drawn by the gravity, hovered on the edge of the circle with her portfolio pressed to her chest. Brian seized her presence like a rope thrown from a helicopter. Monica can explain, he said, turning. She'll tell you, we have a plan for the property. It's best for everyone. He took the portfolio, flipped it open with hands that shook. A neat set of listing documents lay inside, tabs bright as candies. He thrust a pen toward me. If you sign tonight, he said, we can move fast. The market... Excuse me, Monica said, stepping in gently, professional instincts catching up. Before anyone signs, I do need to confirm ownership, trustee status, and whether there is any recorded encumbrance or trust. She glanced at me, then at the room. She had started the day expecting a smooth path. She now found herself at the side of a cliff. Of course, Brian said, desperation sharpening his words. It's in his name. It's simple. I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. I felt the smooth edge of David's letter against my thumb. This might save you a phone call, I said, handing it to her. She opened it. Her eyes moved down the page, a shift in her jaw, small and decisive. She read the first sentence aloud because professionals know when a document needs the dignity of a voice. To whom it may concern, she began, and the room leaned in without meaning to. Be advised that the property located at... She read the address, and I could see 3 colleagues mouthing the street like they were printing it into gossip. Is held by the Reed Home Trust, Thomas Reed, trustee. No listing, transfer, lien, or encumbrance is valid absent the trustee's signed consent. Any party attempting to induce a transfer without the trustee's consent should be notified that such conduct may constitute fraud. She looked up at me, then at Brian. She closed the portfolio slowly. We won't be moving forward tonight, she said, or at all unless Mr. Reed, as trustee, requests it. She nodded at me with something like respect. Congratulations on your daughter's wedding, she added, and stepped back into the crowd, already declining Brian's frantic whisper with a raised open palm. The circle didn't cheer. Weddings don't do that. But the energy changed. The murmur carried a different color now, half shock, half recognition. Some of Brian's friends discovered the fascinating interior design of their shoes. A man from sales who had admired Brian's tie 30 minutes earlier slipped away, bundle of nerves with a glass of champagne. Brian looked from Richard to me, to the letter, as if each could be convinced to become something else. He reached toward me with his empty hand, as if the right gesture might turn the moment back into what it had been in his head. I only wanted to protect the value, he said. His voice cracked on value. I thought you needed guidance. Guidance, I said, and the word tasted strange. I took the envelope back and slid it away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The law, the cufflinks, and the lake behind the window did the heavy lifting. You stood in my kitchen, I said. You called my home a dump. You told me I should be grateful to be managed. You told your friends I was dead weight. You told me to wear a rental so you wouldn't be embarrassed. His mouth opened. No sound came. And now you tell me this is about protection. His face crumpled and then hardened. Finally, his anger found something to hold. You misled me, he said, pointing as if accusation might build a bridge. You acted like you were poor, like you had nothing. You set me up. Richard stepped in, one hand raised. He didn't set you up, he said. He gave you an opportunity to be decent without incentive, and you failed. The words landed heavy as a judge's gavel. A busser slid past us, soft shoes whispering. The room breathed. I took the small envelope from my other pocket, the one from the bank. It had weight to it, both literal and otherwise. I held it in my palm, where those who needed to see could see. This is my gift for my daughter and her husband, I said. $45,000. Not because of impressing anyone, because I love her, because I've always given what I could. I let the envelope rest on the white linen of the nearest small table. But I'm also giving something else to the man she married. I let my eyes settle on Brian. A condition? He straightened, hope and fear fighting for space. Anything, he said. I'm listening. Never again judge a person by the size of their paycheck or the label on their jacket, I said. Not in my presence, not in my family, not in your work. If you can't do that, then you can't stand next to my daughter, and you can't stand under the roof of the company that fed you. The varnish on his confidence peeled. He looked at Richard like a student caught with the answer key. Mr. Cole, please, Monday, Richard said, and the words sounded like a door closing. You will come to HR. We will discuss your status. Today, you will apologize to Thomas. And to Nancy. You will do it without excuses. If you can't find the words, we will find someone else to read your job description. Brian's lips trembled, and then the tears came, not large, not theatrical, just the first betrayals of a dam he'd thought indestructible. He turned to my daughter. I'm sorry, he said, reaching for her hand. She let him take only the fingertips. I was stupid. I was proud. I thought I needed to prove something. You proved something, I said. Just not what you meant to. He looked at me, eyes red, chest struggling to climb back to a steady rhythm. Please, he whispered, don't let this destroy everything. I felt the old anger surge, then ebb, then settle in a lower, steadier place. I'm not interested in destruction, I said. I'm interested in repair. If you want my forgiveness, you'll have to earn it with how you treat people who can't do anything for you. Behind him, two co-workers stared very hard at their glasses, as if the bubbles held answers. Richard's hand found my shoulder again. He leaned in close enough that only I could hear. You want him gone? He's gone, he said. Say the word. The old me, the me from the nights on the concrete floor of a garage with a space heater and a hope, might have taken the clean win. But there's a difference between revenge and repair. Give him probation, I said quietly. 6 months. No second chance after that. Make his success depend on the teams he supports, not the people he flatters. Richard nodded once, the nod we used when we'd found a line that held. He turned to Brian. 6 months, he said. Earn it, or we're done. Monica reappeared at the edge of the circle, a woman who had stepped into the wrong scene and had the grace to step out. Mr. Reed, she said, if you ever need evaluation for estate planning or tax purposes, call me. Otherwise, congratulations. I thanked her. Her exit was as clean as a well-written sentence. The quartet found a soft tune and laid it like a blanket across the room. People remembered their drinks. They remembered the buffet. The lights seemed warmer now. My daughter stood between me and the man she had married 15 minutes earlier. She looked at me with eyes that asked more questions than any ceremony can answer. I took her face in my hands, the way I did when she was 6, and her hair smelled like summer grass. I love you, I said. That stays true whatever happens next. She nodded, tears threatening, then retreating, dignity straightening her spine. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. For everything, for being you. She looked at Brian, then back at me. We'll see who he wants to be. I glanced toward the windows. The lake had gone darker blue, the kind that keeps secrets and ships. I felt the cufflinks against my wrist bones and finally let myself enjoy what they had managed to say without speaking. A colleague from operations approached Richard and asked under his breath if he knew. Richard laughed, surprised at himself. "I didn't," he said. "Thomas outplayed me." He lifted his glass in my direction, and I lifted mine back. Brian asked to speak with me alone. We stepped into a quieter alcove near a painting of a woman staring off into someone else's horizon. His hands twisted. His voice was low and raw. "I said terrible things," he began. I thought if I controlled the pieces, I controlled the game." He looked older in that moment, not wiser, just stripped of polish. "You have every right to hate me." I shook my head. "Hate is easy," I said. "What's hard is changing how you see people when there's nothing in it for you." He nodded, swallowed. "I want to change," he said in a voice that sounded like a man calling from across a river. "Not because of the job, because of her." He glanced toward Nancy, standing now with her friends, eyes still shining. "She deserves better than the version of me you met." "You'll have to prove it," I said. "To her, to yourself." I put a hand on his shoulder, not to comfort, but to clarify the pressure. "And you'll have to live with consequences. Today is one. Tomorrow we'll have more." He closed his eyes like a man bracing for a wave. "I understand," he said. "I will do whatever it takes." I took my hand away. "Start by apologizing to the people you treated like furniture," I said. "Waiters, staff, the cousin you ignored because he doesn't fit your idea of success. Start there. The rest will follow, or it won't." We returned to the room. He did what I asked. It wasn't elegant. It was honest enough to keep from curdling. I watched him thank the man refilling water glasses. I watched him take his aunt's hand and tell her he was wrong. These were small bricks. Small bricks build real bridges when you set enough of them in a straight line. Later, when the cake had been cut and toasts had been made and laughter had started to sound like a promise again, I slipped the envelope with the check into my daughter's palm. "For your first year," I said, "not because he deserves it, because you do. Use it to build something good." She nodded, the pressure of her fingers grateful and strong. "We will," she said. "I will." Richard and I stood side by side near the exit as guests began to drift out into the night. He bumped my shoulder with his. "You still surprise me," he said. "You always did." I smiled at the door, at the lights beyond. "They thought I was weak," I said, not to boast, but to mark the moment for myself. "Now they see the consequences." He laughed softly. "Monday," he said again, and we both knew that work sometimes begins where parties end. I found a quiet corner and sat for a minute, letting my bones remember that they too had done something today. I watched my daughter dance with her friends. I watched Brian carry dishes to the bus station without being asked, a small penance, not a performance. I watched the staff smile at each other when they thought no one saw, relief replacing the tight line that had run along the edge of the evening. I touched the cufflinks and thought of that first winter in the garage, breath puffing in front of our faces as we wrote code with fingerless gloves, a space heater fighting an unfair fight. We had built something out of nothing. We had kept it human when money tried to make us forget. Today, in a hotel where everything gleamed, the human part finally mattered again. Before I left, I found Brian near the door. He straightened as if for inspection. I shook his hand. "Tomorrow," I said, "you'll learn what it means to live with outcomes." He swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir," he said, simple, almost naked. I stepped into the lobby, the marble reflecting a man I still recognized. I stood a moment and let the air settle in my lungs, then walked out into the Chicago night, the lake's breath meeting mine, a cool agreement that a thing done right can stand a long time. Feeling dismissed, invisible, or talked down to is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and worthy, no matter their bank account or their suit, comment the keyword justice. Now watch what they do to change that. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after the wedding, I woke with a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes when the storm has already done its worst and left the air washed clean. The documents I had signed, the envelope I had placed in my daughter's hand, and the firm words I had spoken in front of everyone, all of it lingered in my chest like an anchor. I walked down the hall of my home, the house worth nearly $600,000, and for the first time in months, I felt that its walls belonged to me again, not as a possession to be fought over, but as a legacy preserved. I picked up the folder on my desk, the one from David Harris, my lawyer, and tucked the final notarized page into place. $45,000 had been transferred as a wedding gift, but it was bound to conditions that no one could undo. The house, the savings, the trust, untouched, shielded by law, and by the lessons of a man who had lived long enough to know when to fight. The days after felt lighter, though not without their shadows. I walked into my study and looked around at the space that had been neglected while suspicion and betrayal clouded my mind. Dust lay across the desk where I had once spent nights with Mary, sorting bills and writing checks for Nancy's tuition. The shelves leaned with books she had insisted I keep, biographies of people who had faced their own storms. I cleaned slowly, setting each item back into its place as though I were putting my own life back in order. The old photo of our wedding went back on the wall, polished until her smile seemed to shine through the glass. I whispered to her as I hung it, "I did right, Mary. I didn't let them take what we built. You were right all along. Don't let anyone cheapen a life's work." My voice cracked, but not from grief, from relief, the kind of relief that comes when you've honored a promise to someone you can't touch anymore. News traveled quickly through the company. Richard kept his word. Brian had been placed on probation, his position suddenly fragile under the weight of his own arrogance. Colleagues who once laughed at his jokes now shook their heads. I heard whispers that he sat alone at lunch, that his emails went unanswered, that the people he once boasted to were keeping their distance. He still had the job, but not the pride. Pride had been stripped from him in front of the very people he had tried to impress. I didn't need to witness it firsthand. The shame would do its own work. I sat on the porch one evening, sipping coffee while the light drained out of the sky, and thought about the way pride turns into blindness. Brian had tried to take control of a house he never built, of savings he never earned, of a company he didn't know I had created. He thought I was an old man with nothing left but a past. Instead, he discovered that the past is a kind of foundation you can stand on when people try to dig the ground out from under you. I shook my head at the irony of it all. Money can blind people, I murmured into the quiet air. But character decides who's truly respected. That thought carried me into a gentler routine. I started spending more mornings in the garden, hands in the soil, feeling the kind of peace that only comes when you stop defending and start living again. I pruned the rose bush Mary had planted, the one she always said was too stubborn to die. I sat in the evenings at my desk, reading letters from old friends, answering them with words I hadn't had the energy to write before. And I kept reminding myself of the truth I had learned the hard way, that betrayal may hurt, but it also strips away illusions and leaves behind the real shape of things. Nancy came to visit once with Brian in tow. She looked nervous, as if afraid of how I would receive them. I gave her a hug, strong enough to let her know she was still my daughter, no matter what mistakes had been made. Brian stood a little behind her, shoulders bent, his voice lower than I had ever heard it. He offered an apology again, this time without excuses, without the frantic energy of a man trying to save face. Just a few simple words that landed like stones dropped into still water. "I was wrong. I disrespected you. I disrespected what you built." I listened, then nodded. But I didn't offer him the comfort he wanted. I said only, "Apologies matter less than what you do tomorrow. Time will tell." He dropped his gaze and said nothing more. That was enough. My boundary stood. He would not have the power to wound me again. Richard called often in those weeks, sometimes to update me on the company, sometimes just to share a laugh about the old days when we were two young men in a garage with a dream and a heater that barely worked. "You did what you had to do," he told me once. "You reminded everyone that the man they thought was finished still holds the foundation under their feet." I thanked him, though what I felt wasn't victory so much as release. I hadn't needed to crush Brian. I only needed to protect what mattered. That was enough. One afternoon, I sat in my study, now freshly ordered, and looked at the envelope where the check stub for the wedding gift rested. It symbolized more than money. It symbolized choice, the choice to give, but also the choice to draw a line. To protect the house, the trust, the legacy that had been built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I felt no guilt, only peace. For the first time since I had heard Brian's mocking words, I could breathe deeply without the weight of resentment sitting in my chest. Brian's fall continued quietly. Word spread that he had lost major accounts, that Richard had reassigned key projects to others. He was still in the building, but not in the circle. Pride stripped, reputation thin, he had become a cautionary tale whispered in break rooms. Meanwhile, I remained exactly where I had always been, steady, respected, intact. That contrast was lesson enough. Evenings grew gentler. I would walk through the neighborhood, greeting neighbors who had heard some version of the story and offering quiet nods of respect. I stopped at the park one afternoon and sat on a bench under the oak trees, listening to children laugh and remembering when Nancy was young, running through the grass with ribbons in her hair. I let myself smile. Betrayal may change the way you see people, but it doesn't have to steal joy. As autumn came, I began to think about how to use my time differently. I had defended my home, my savings, my name. Now it was time to live beyond defense. I reached out to a local volunteer group that served meals to veterans and the homeless. They welcomed me quickly, surprised, maybe, that a man with my background wanted to stand behind a counter and ladle soup. But there was peace in it, peace in the simple act of giving without being asked. I told myself, this is how I start again. One evening after a shift, I sat in my quiet study, the wedding photo shining in the lamplight, and spoke softly into the stillness. "I don't need them anymore, Mary. I have myself, and I have the life we built." The words steadied me, anchored me, gave me the closure I needed. I know now that the house, the money, even the company, were never just about wealth. They were about respect, about the work of a lifetime, about boundaries that should never be crossed. I kept them intact, and in doing so, I kept myself intact. The chapter of betrayal was over. What came next would be different. I had a new rhythm, a new community, and the quiet strength of knowing I had survived the storm with dignity. That was the real inheritance, not for Nancy, not for Brian, but for me. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a thought lingered. Maybe this was just the beginning of a different kind of story, one where I gave not to those who betrayed me, but to those who understood the value of gratitude. That thought carried me toward tomorrow, where a new project waited, a small volunteer effort that would grow into something larger. I closed the photo album that night, let my hand rest on the wood of the desk, and whispered one last time before sleep. I finally did right. For you, for me, for the life we built. I wake now to quieter mornings. The first rays of light fall through the curtains of my new home, smaller than the old house, but filled with a peace I had not felt in years. The garden out back has become my sanctuary. I kneel in the soil, pressing my hands into the earth, planting tomatoes and herbs the way Mary once loved to do. Every leaf, every bloom feels like proof that life can begin again, even after betrayal shakes its roots. The walls of this house hold no arguments, no whispered schemes, only the hum of my own thoughts, steady and free. I spend my afternoons at the community center, helping serve meals or reading to children after school. They don't know my story, not the details at least, but they greet me with open smiles, as if sensing I carry something heavy that has finally been put down. Sometimes I laugh with them. Sometimes I sit in the back and watch the way life unfolds in small, honest gestures. These moments remind me that dignity is not in what you own, but in how you live, how you give, and how you choose to stand when others try to push you down. The lesson from all of this has settled deep in me, like stone beneath the foundation. Parents must not let their sacrifices be treated as disposable. We give, yes, because that is our role, but giving does not mean allowing ourselves to be stripped of respect. To other fathers and mothers out there, I say, guard the value of your life's work. Stand firm even when the ones you raised forget where they came from. For children, the truth is even sharper. Respecting your parents is not just about duty, it is the root of your own character. When you look at your father or mother and see only what you can take, you cut down the very tree that gave you shade. Money fades, houses crumble, but the respect you show or fail to show will define the person you become. My daughter Nancy has begun to see that now. Slowly, she looks at me with different eyes. She does not say much, but I see the regret in her silence. And for all of us, living in this modern world that worships wealth and speed, the truth is simple. Character is the only asset that cannot be stolen, traded, or bought. I held on to mine when others tried to cheapen it, and in the end, it is all I truly needed. People may chase bank accounts and titles, but what endures is the respect that follows a life lived with honesty. As for Brian, his fall was quieter than his boasting ever was. I hear he rents a small apartment now, stripped of the swagger that once filled every room he walked into. Colleagues keep their distance, and friends no longer call. He tried reaching out, sending a letter with words of apology that might have meant more if they had come sooner. I placed the envelope in a drawer and never answered. My heart has no room for apologies that serve only the guilty. I told myself firmly, I don't need their sorry. I have my own life, and that's enough. And with those words, I felt free again. One afternoon, a different kind of letter arrived. It was from Richard, my old partner at Technova. He wrote of a lecture series at the university on lessons learned through business and through life. He asked if I would come, not to speak of profits or losses, but of resilience, dignity, and what it means to hold on when others try to tear you down. I sat with the letter in my lap, sunlight pouring through the window, and I smiled. This was the kind of ending Mary would have wanted, not bitterness, not silence, but passing on the wisdom that betrayal had carved into me like initials on oak. So I said yes. I would stand before strangers and tell them what it means to be tested by your own blood and what it means to rise again, steady, unbroken. Not out of pride, but out of a duty to remind others that family is not just about blood. It is about respect. Now, as I sit by the window in the evening light, the house humming with stillness, I let the words come softly, like a prayer. I don't need their apology. I have myself, and that is enough. The roses in the garden nod in the wind. The photo of Mary on the mantel glows in the fading sun. I feel her there, not as a wound, but as a steady hand on my shoulder, reminding me that dignity outlives betrayal. This is the close of my story. The house may be smaller, the rooms quieter, but my life is full again. I am free, I am seen. And every day I live now is proof that I chose the right path. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.